Richard and I thought it would be nice to just share with you some of the ways we like to inquire together when we're looking at topics that really call to us, spiritual topics especially. Sometimes things about topics that are happening in the day. So what I was thinking of for today is something that's been on my mind a lot recently, which is and this whole COVID thing that's going on this last year, which has been so dramatic and shut down so many people's lives, totally changed our economy, not only caused, deaths and so forth, probably not really that much out of the range of what's normal, it seems.
Well, what's historical?
Yeah, what's historical. And the all-cause mortality is pretty much the same as usual. So, so in many ways, it seems like it's been overblown. And from your experience in epidemiology, you can see that. We've talked about a lot of that. We've pushed back, both of us, in our blogs and our Facebook and this and that, talking about that part. What I don't get, really, is why, when people hear what seems to us like the facts, or just another point of view, why so many people get pretty emotional about it and just back off and don't want to talk with you anymore, or they deny what you're saying and just kind of fall back on the mainstream media's narrative about it. What do you think?
Yeah, I've seen that emotion, which is surprising sometimes. I mean, you can understand that people have different opinions, and some people will disagree.
Sure.
And that, obviously can lead into inquiry if those persons are willing, like we're talking now.
If there's a spirit of cooperation.
But to be in a state of inquiry would require you to have a mind that we might say is open to learning something different.
Right.
Because if you've already decided how it is,
Right.
then you can feel like you're being attacked.
Right. So you think people just take it kind of personally, like they're being attacked too much? I mean.
Well, I think that might be what happens with some is they feel like you're attacking their security because they've already committed themselves to what they think is the right thing.
Well, I think I look back at myself. I mean, I sort of think I've seen my own views change a lot in the last 12 or 13 months. I mean, like Christmas the year before, I was like really, just part of sort of you might say the liberal establishment. I was just kind of going, oh yeah, that Trump is crazy. I was kind of, just making fun of him and stuff like that, doing my little Trump act, and and then as I was thinking about that, when we were all kind of enjoying being right together, this party we were at, and it occurred to me, and I said it to someone there, he's just another person. He's a human being and a soul, and why can't we just be open to everyone and kind of like hear where they're at and what they have to say? And I think that one insight that I had at that point really opened me up to looking at things differently. I mean, as well as all the red flags that were going on, about the numbers that didn't sort of add up. And the restrictions seemed so out of kiddly whack with what you and your training in epidemiology.
So to be more accepting of different views, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but I think it's a matter of recognizing that everyone is, in their heart, the same as you. They're a struggling human being. They may seem narcissistic. They may seem like they're withdrawing. They may seem opinionated. They may seem like they hold a view you just can't agree with. But if you were walking a mile in their shoes, you'd feel the same way. I mean, when I was a counselor, I noticed that a lot.
Yeah, that is a good insight. I think I would add to that I don't have to walk in their shoes. All I have to do is to realize then when I'm having that attitude and judgment about them that I'm wearing the same shoes. I'm just like they are, in terms of having opinions and thinking I'm right and being judgmental. And so I think that that's a real good insight to see that that's a very common response that people get into. And then, of course, the question that follows that is, what value does that have?
What value does what have?
To be critical and judgmental and make
images
images and say they're bad and they're agents of the devil, etc., etc. How does that serve us?
Right. It tends to polarize because whenever I mean, and maybe a lot of it did start in a way with Trump because he was really critical, and
Right.
perhaps for good reasons. I mean, there's been a lot of true deep state stuff coming out, you know, but it's like, it started kind of a war and a conflict. I don't know if it could have gone any other way. Maybe, you know, but it seems like it would have had to go that way from the beginning. That people, that there's been a lot of corruption, it seems like, in our society, and in journalism, and in the government, and in the medical profession, and, you know, in industry in general. Well, much of our lives have talked about that, like in our books, we've been critical, you know, of conventional science and medicine, of the way things are handled environmentally, and humane issues with animals, and all of that. And so this year, this has really triggered for me a real, you might say, critical look at the threats to our freedom. And for me, that seems like a really primary thing, because if we aren't free to speak, to think, to act, to breathe, even without the masks, then what else can we do that has any meaning?
Might it just be, I don't know if to say just be, might it be the way we were talking about a moment ago, about having a mental state, a state of consciousness in which one is judgmental, forming images, likes and dislikes, turning to authority, all of that. You're moving it to the point where now it's becoming the same psychological movement now being organized into corporations and into political groups and into medical systems. And it's just simply playing out what we're all holding on to as our way of dealing with it.
So it's a collective ego, or collective identity, tribal identities that. And so I remember when I was studying some stuff about psychology and so forth, psychology and mind, they talked about corporate cultures and how you can change a corporate culture. And I remember now they said you kind of have to do it from the top. That's interesting. So it's like if you have, we could use some enlightened leadership. We really could, to inspire people. But on the other hand, I hear a lot of people saying recently that, you know, there's really maybe no one that's going to come and rescue us all, you know, from either side, if you will. And so really it's a grassroots movement. It's up to each of us and all of us collectively to raise our awareness, our consciousness to the point that we stop doing all this polarization, and we are able to just think rationally and solve whatever problems there are, be they medical problems or environmental problems or government problems, and do them in a way that just is the best we can come to together. So why don't we do that more? Again.
Well, maybe another way of asking it is, again, if we're in a state where we take a position and we feel we're right and we're making other people wrong, and oftentimes, as we know, that can build to the point of actual hatred and wanting them to die, right? So if we extend
You didn't hear that.
If we extend it to, well, I mean, in the sense of, I hope they die early, or I hope so and so.
If they just go out of the picture, things would be so much easier.
Or we might say so and so is pushing the vaccine. I hope that person gets it and has a vaccine reaction.
Yeah, I mean,
which is a way of saying.
Right, it's like a murderous thought, and people on both sides, I think, have had thoughts of hatred like that. They just want to disappear each other, and yet I think what made a difference for me, like a year ago, and I said I had kind of a change of heart about that, was I just realized that everybody has something to offer of value. You know, I think before that I had just I'd been a Democrat all my life, and I thought, you know, Democrats are really on the correct side. You know, the Republicans are just too selfish and this and that. It seems like now I see, you know, the good and the bad, so to speak, in both sides. And it's just like, and neither is perfect, and both are just positions. Is it possible to go beyond fixed positions, really? I think that's what, as a species, we need to come to.
Yeah, well, I was going to say a moment ago that that state of mind, you know, where you feel judgmental and polarized, and you feel a lot of emotion about it, right? Antagonism, wanting to fight it. If I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say then much of what we experience out there with people is that state of mind being displayed.
Yeah.
So if that makes sense, then the question is, who could come to save us from that? If we're creating it,
Mm-hmm.
what could they do? Come and kill the ones we don't like?
Mm-hmm.
Come and
Right.
purge our minds in some way?
Well, here's kind of what comes up for me as a dilemma about that, and this has been coming up not only this year, but a lot of times in my life when looking at these issues. There's just part of my response to this situation that's like a warrior. It's like I must act. I must do, like if this is Nazi Germany or something, and they're starting to take away the Jews, you really should do something. It's like your moral imperative to act. If you saw somebody beating up a child in your front yard, you're not going to just sit there and meditate. You got to go out and take an action. So that's one response. It's like the impulse to respond in sort of a save them kind of way outwardly, to take action, to be an activist. But the other side is more like, well, and some people are advocating this, just some spiritual teachers. They're just saying, just be more present, do more meditation, raise the vibes, raise the consciousness. And my concern is that that's more convenient to do. It's easier to do, it's safer to do. It doesn't take as much bravery or much risk, but does it work?
Mm-hmm. Well, a third possibility is
Okay.
one takes action as seems appropriate
Mm-hmm.
to help others as they seem to need it,
Mm-hmm.
or to communicate as seems to be appropriate.
Well, sure.
But you come from a state then, instead of a state of hatred
Mm-hmm.
and strong dislike and emotion, you
Yeah.
come from a state of calmness and love.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I mean, even that example of, someone beating up a child in the front yard or something,
Mm-hmm.
like, I can think of times we've talked about earlier in our lives where we've heard of people like where they were a counselor or something, and someone, say an angry husband came in with a gun, and it was really scary or did something, or like I had a friend who was walking the streets of New York and somebody came at him with a knife.
Mm-hmm.
And in both cases, the person that could have been a victim there responded with a very compassionate, present kind of state and saying things like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
can I help you or whatever, and that broke through that veil of
Mm-hmm.
aggression and stopped it.
Mm-hmm. Because it tends to become stronger the more you resist it.
And you can see that maybe at a personal level like that. But again, I go back to like some of these things that are happening now seem so far away, involve these elite people that seem to have way too much power, that are in distant places and control the media and so forth. And so, what can we do?
I think part of that state of mind is one of, another way of describing it is that when you get into that state where you feel projection of dislike to so many people or situations, you're becoming more and more separate in your feeling. You're feeling separate from others and separate from the situation. And that state of consciousness, I would suggest to you, that as it develops and grows, one of the things that puts out that, sustains it is a feeling of helplessness due to things like distance or people unavailable. It's part of the picture that's projected out there.
There's also the we, they. I mean, there's the I, them. I mean, there's just like I know what's right. I know the moral imperative here, and they are being selfish, or they are being whatever. So, like, let's say we take some of these people that we often, when we're talking about, we kind of see as the perps that are doing things that seem like more for the agenda of their greed or their power rather than what's really for the best of the planet or the people. Then, whether maybe in their minds, like I was saying, like I had this kind of turn around with Trump, like maybe they're doing the best they know how. Maybe they're not really all about greed. Maybe they just think that they can make both of those things work. I can make some money and I can help the world.
Certainly possible.
Or because I have so much money and special knowledge, I can help the world. Even if they...
Well, I've known people that I don't agree with what they're doing, but I can tell that they're being sincere.
Right.
They think they're doing the right thing.
So do you think, like, at a kind of a psychic level, let's say, we're talking about some of these particular elites that a lot of people are kind of upset with. Some people still see as heroes, like, let's say Gates or whatever. So some people see him as kind of a villain, and others would see him as a hero. But let's say you see him as more of a perp or a villain, or doing something that's causing more harm than good, then do you think it could actually help if you were just a simple change of heart, where maybe you spend some time in prayer or meditation, just trying to see this person as being a child of God?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and you can also withdraw power from them psychologically.
That makes sense.
As soon as you think they're either a perp or a hero, whatever it is, you're projecting onto them, which may,
Right.
as you said, may or may not be true.
And for all we know, the whole thing's a projection of something of the universal mind inside. You know, it's like
so
not separate.
So instead of doing that, you simply withdraw your emotion one way or the other from them. They're just another person like you out there.
Right.
And you go into yourself and you say, I'm responsible for this and I'm going to see it changed.
And I'm reminded of some things you've told me, like you've read stories about a woman who was in a Nazi war camp.
Concentration camp.
And she went into that kind of deeper state of mind, and just everything is God, and she's free, and she just walked right out of the camp, right in front of the guards. It's
Nobody saw her,
and so
or stopped her.
It seems like you certainly could, at least in your own world, your own reality, have a much more pleasant or safe experience. And of course, the more people that would do that, and hopefully videos like this could inspire people to go take this direction.
Well, I think it becomes more obvious if you were to say, what if everybody now just simply stopped having all that emotion about it and stopped fearing it?
Yeah, stop fearing the virus, stop feeling they had to wear a mask unless they're really in a situation where somebody's sneezing right on them or something.
What if they were all calm?
Yeah, just calm and...
Imagine how different it would be.
Yeah, and and just were, without being angry and protesting and setting things on fire and being nasty about it, just, stood their ground and just like, look, I'm a human being, I need to breathe and I want to interact with other people and be less than 6 feet away, and it's like, I know a lot of people that are doing that and very successfully right now, and I think it's really important. If no one was doing that, we'd be in a real pickle.
Yeah, a slight, I don't know, I was going to say difference, I don't know if that's the right word. I was thinking from what you said about, sort of like visualizing them as a child of God and so on, is that I think really the very best state to come to is where one doesn't feel one is doing anything like that. You're just simply expressing what's true, letting it come through you.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to do anything. I'm not trying to make somebody into something they're not.
That's more like the idea of letting go and letting God.
Yeah, so instead of, before I was making them into an agent of the devil, and now I'm making them into a child of God. How about if I don't do either one? I just leave them alone, and I just think positively and lovingly about what comes my way. I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, I think so. And I think sometimes when you're saying that, I notice what comes to me, there's a certain quality of, I'd almost call it bemusement. It's like, kind of like, well, isn't this an interesting drama that's unfolding? And not to take it too seriously, it's just sort of like death, I'm thinking like when my parents died, and my father had kind of a good sense of humor, and it seemed like, he obviously went through some suffering and stuff at the end, but he had kind of a sense of humor, and after he died, he seemed to pull some prankster tricks, setting the clock at his favorite number and doing different things, making the faucets kind of with lights, do things and stuff. So it's like, in the big picture, this is a passing experience, even though it seems really big right here on planet Earth. It's a huge universe. There's like more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on Earth. Just put things in perspective.
Right.
So maybe we're taking it too seriously.
Well, maybe we are. Maybe we're looking at it too narrowly, too.
Yeah. On the other hand, if you were a person who lost your job, lost a lot of friends, maybe you lost your health, lost your standing in community, were feeling really depressed, weren't able to go to school, and all those kinds of things you lost your income, that are affecting so many people now, how are they to deal with it?
Well, it's very much a challenge if that's the state they're in, they've lost all those things. But I think that's still, if that's where they are, I don't see any particular value in becoming angry and hating others.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that's going to get you a job,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So I think, like we're talking, coming to deal with it somehow, taking responsibility for it, developing a state of mind which is accepting and moving on.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the best way.
And trusting.
Mm-hmm.
I know we are fortunate because it hasn't really made that much tangible difference in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true of a lot of retired people that we know living in a nice town like we live in.
Yeah,
But, for some people, I know it's a life or death thing.
sure.
And,
Yeah.
look, one cannot solve everyone's problems. That's as an individual, and that's maybe not our
No,
responsibility.
no, I
It's
don't
like
think it's our
it's the let go
responsibility.
and let God part. It's like
Mm-hmm.
maybe each soul has chosen this challenge to learn
Yeah, I think
something.
in many ways you can see it as when we jump in and start taking all these positions with all this emotion, we're actually creating an obstacle to, what you said, coming through, love and caring coming
Mhm,
through. It's just
mhm.
like all the energy is channeling into conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I also am thinking of, expression. We met at a Krishnamurti dialogue weekend
Mm-hmm.
back in the 70s in Ojai. He talked about something called the awakening of intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so it wasn't like, your IQ, but it was more,
Yes.
like the idea.
Wisdom. more.
Wisdom, really wisdom, universal wisdom, and maybe some guidance, some insights would come through when you're when you're in a more egoless and peaceful state of mind.
That's when it becomes present, is when you're
Yeah.
not caught in your little selfish
Right.
position.
Yeah, and then you might get, at the personal, local level, an idea for something to do right here and now today.
Mm-hmm. Might
And,
come
maybe-
up
and if
all
you're
of
on
a sudden.
if you're on a city council, you might get an idea of something to do
Right.
collectively or whatever, or you
Something you never would have thought of
might.
otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's for now probably about the best we can come to. Do you think?
Seems to be, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
I don't know.
That's what we're coming up with.
Yeah, that's right. So we just kind of decided to explore this topic spontaneously without any premeditated conclusion. So, and that actually in itself is really kind of a demonstration of what we would suggest, or I would say probably feel like is really the best thing to do.
Worth considering.
Yeah, it's worth considering. It's like to have an open mind and an open
Mhm.
heart. The two things together can mean we might see things really differently than we've been seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and to not create an identity with your tribe, your group of people, your fellow liberals, or your fellow conservatives, or your no maskers, or your maskers, or your no vaxxers, or your vaxxers, or all these kinds of labels and things that we're putting on ourselves and each other. Because what we really are is we're souls, we're beings. And I don't think I've ever appreciated human beings as much as I have this last year, when we haven't seen them so much, and when there's some threat, it seems like, of humanity becoming more like robots, kind of surveilled and herded into kind of mass conformity and censorship and mandates and so forth. So it's made me really appreciate
Mm-hmm.
who we are and what we are in our natural state.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for listening. And if you like these kinds of dialogues and insights, just check out our channels. We both have channels here on YouTube, Susan Pitcairn and Dr. Richard Pitcairn. Take care, and please share.